I'd like to welcome Sofi Oksanen, and I'm going to introduce her to those few who might not know her. Sofi Oksanen is one of Finland's most acclaimed writers. A novelist and playwright, she is internationally recognized for works that grapple with history, memory, and identity, themes central to the opera we are here to discuss. Her collaboration with Kaija Saariaho and Alexis Barrière on the libretto of Innocence brought her literary sensibility into direct dialogue with the operatic form. Writing a libretto is a unique art. It's not simply poetry set to music, nor drama with songs being added. It requires leaving space for the music to complete what words begin, space for silence to carry what neither words nor music can express. Oksanen brought to this task her gifts as a storyteller and her deep engagement with difficult subjects, trauma, displacement, and the long shadow of violence across generations. The result is a libretto that functions as both dramatic architecture and poetic invocation, resonant even on the page. Joining her in conversation is Yayoi Everett, a distinguished musicologist at Hunter College and the CUNY Graduate Center. Her work on contemporary opera, narrative theory, and the intersection of music with trauma and memory provides the ideal framework for exploring the literary dimension of Innocence and its intersection with music. This conversation promises a rare opportunity to hear a librettist reflect on her craft in dialogue with a scholar who understands opera from the inside out. Please join me in welcoming Yayoi Everett and Sofi Oksanen.
Thank you, Tina, for that wonderful introduction. It's incredible honor to be able to speak to you after researching your work for about 2 months. And you told me not to read Purge, but I did anyway. I'm halfway through, and I am struck by how strong the women are in the novel, Ali True especially, and the multisensory environment that you create in our imagination about smell, about the images outside of the Estonian farm, and in spite of the atrocities that happen in the characters' lives, how strong they are, however emotionally repressed.
Well, thank you for your kind words. That's the best thing actually about writing the novel, is that with words you can make the world alive. So in that way, I think novel beats movies and TV shows, because you cannot actually smell what the world was like back in the days, or in the or whatever is happening in the novel, but because I'm mostly writing historical novels, so that's why I'm trying to make the past as lively as possible and write to all senses. And that's, again, very different compared to writing a libretto, because then I don't need to worry about actually making the story alive, because there's music and there's singers, so they are doing that part for me. But in a novel, you have to do it all yourself.
Absolutely. And I'd like to spend the remaining time moving from general to more specific questions about your traumatic experience being Estonian, Finnish Estonian. First, I like to, the lingering question I have is the incidence of gun shooting in Finland that inspired this topic for opera. Of course, in the United States, since 1999, there have been 154 incidences of gun shooting reported in North America alone, and we're almost numb from how frequently this occurs, and the fact that gun regulations remain very lax. So in comparison, my research on gun shooting in Finland maybe yielded maybe 2 or 3 instances. And so I'd like to just ask you about what inspired this topic in your mind.
Well, when Kaija asked me to write the libretto, she gave me free hands when it comes to the topic of the opera. What she wanted to have is multiple linguistic setting, and she wanted to write music for different languages, and she wanted to have all the singers on stage throughout the whole opera. And these two building blocks I had to keep in mind because and to find a story that makes it possible. Thank you. And because she wanted to have so many different languages, we didn't know in the beginning which languages, but having so many singers or characters on stage means that I don't have enough. I cannot spend words on giving them actually a background. So I cannot introduce them because I don't have enough words for that. So I needed to have we have a school, which is understandable concept to every single person in the world. You understand what a school, I don't need to tell you that this is a school. I don't need to use words for that. And wedding is another good thing from this perspective because everybody knows what a wedding is, and I don't need to introduce the family relations of the characters. If we had less singers, then I wouldn't have this problem in a way, because then I could use words for introducing people's, who is who to to another person. But I needed to have something that is understandable at once. And then I started to think about the topic, which allows us to have them all on stage, and we don't need to introduce them. I can tell their backstory like I do in the text, but I don't need to in the beginning have a very long introduction to the story. So that is how actually school became to the picture. And the students are understandable without explaining what they are doing. They are students at school. A teacher is a teacher, so a priest is a priest as well. But I was also, I was aware that this is going to travel to other countries. So I needed to have a topic that would be understandable in other countries. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot have something that is typically Finnish. But then again, I started to think about school shootings because it's something that is also taking place in other countries, so it's not uniquely Finnish. And also I suspected, that's another thing, because when I start to write the libretto, I know that the premiere is years ahead, and I have to be somehow certain that the topic is still going to be relevant after, 5 years, 10 years, and it is very difficult to predict that, actually. And of course, I have to say the majority of my topics are topics that I would love to see them totally outdated when the book comes out or when there's a premiere. But I had a kind of feeling that we are going to see more school shootings. No, unfortunately, because I didn't see anything happening in the world that would actually make it different. Of course, in some countries it's not like an issue, but Finland has a long history with guns, and actually, which is a bit weird. If you think about the number of guns people have, then it's United States, German, and Finland. So it's a bit weird for a Nordic country, but that is the case, and that is also the reason actually why we have school shootings. The first one was 1989, and I don't think it was understood or even thought that it's going to be a phenomenon. The shooter was at the time 14. But it didn't create like public discussion because people just thought that it's singular. Yes, one time that it's not going to happen again. And then in 2007 we had another one with multiple victims, and then 2008 again multiple victims, and that is actually when things kind of started to change. But I'm not still happy with our gun regulations. It's too easy to get a weapon.
Thank you for that. I know you're going to say not another question like this, but the topic of the title of the opera has elicited so many questions, and we all wonder about what innocence means. But when I watched the interview conducted by Liisa-Maija Hausalo prior to the Finnish premiere in October 2022, you mentioned an initial title for the opera in Finnish as Kuokka Vieras. I'm sorry, I've been coached, but okay. And it means uninvited guest or gate crusher, as you say it. And that makes perfect sense to me. The adult survivors are flawed, and they are in a state of denial. The survivors suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome and so forth. And so but of course it's about the waitress, Teresa and Marketa. So are you happy with the title Innocence and with all its ambivalence, as you...
Oh, definitely, yes. And I was kind of, the working title was Kuokka Vieras, the uninvited guests, but it was not easy to translate. I mean, it sounded perfect in Finnish. Also because Kuokka Vieras is a word, I mean the first word in this word actually means, I don't know what is in English, it's a tool where you can plow a field. So in that way it has a kind of double meaning in Finnish language, but I mean it doesn't exist in English. I did have some other working titles as well, but then then I started, for some reason I had this, this was absolutely, it feels like that it has nothing to do with the opera, but I was thinking about Age of Innocence. Of course, if you think about, Edith Wharton and Age of Innocence, in a way, you don't see the connection at all, but it was just, image in my head. And then I got stuck with it. And after the conversation we had with Gaia and Alexi, and we said, what if just, what if it could be Innocence? And it does have, it also, opera houses, they tend to love kind of positive titles.
Yes.
So it's less scary to the audience, and it's a word where there's hope.
Yes.
On the other hand, it's a bit paradoxical, but in the word itself, it does include the concept of hope somehow.
Yes, some of us debate after the opera about the meaning of the title Innocence. I'd like to just go now to character representation a little bit and first talk about ghosts in opera. So you have the Commendatore in Don Giovanni, you have Britain's Turn of the Screw, you have Sarajevo and the ghost in something like only the sound remains. Here the ghost is Marketa. I think I understand why she has to be the only ghost, but what was your intention behind just having one ghost that can interact with her mother, but also as the temporality blurs, she is getting up on the table and singing the frog song and so forth. Why one ghost?
Well, it would have been less efficient to have more, and I had the possibility to focus on one mother-daughter relationship. If there had been more, then it wouldn't been, I mean, there's a very limited word count. So in that way, I'm afraid I couldn't have, another father-daughter, mother-daughter relationship in a way that I just didn't have, there was no space for that. Quite often, the solutions you have to make and the decisions you have to make are based on very practical problems, like word count, simply.
Yes, and it also reminded me of Toni Morrison's Beloved. Yeah, and that to me I made that connection yesterday, and I'm thinking, yeah, and it's all about trauma too. Okay, now I'm going to move on to one character that struck me, and it is still lingering in my mind, and it has to do with the othering of student 3, or Iris. To me, when I see this particular Julie Hega, that she strikes me as being non-binary. But maybe that's a decision that was made in the production and has nothing to do with your conception of Iris.
At some point, the composer needs to choose a singer. But the fun thing about Finnish languages is that we don't have a gender.
Yes.
So in that way, actually, when I already had the first version of a libretto, the students didn't have names, and I hadn't chosen the gender for them. So they were just, student number 1, student number 2, student number 3, and I didn't think about the gender at all. But then at some point, and even Kaija wasn't thinking about actually that either. I mean, we just had, Marketa, we knew that she's a girl in a way. Not actually, it was, if you read the text, there was actually nothing about the gender, but it was just, we both had the image in our head that she's a girl. But for the rest, we hadn't made a decision, so in a way that then at some point, the composer had to make a decision about the singers. And then Kaija made a decision, we did discuss about that, but it didn't actually matter to me that who's going to be a girl and who's going to be a boy. But we did work on the piece, like, I don't know, I think almost 2 years without not knowing the gender. So I think that if that's a good question, because in a way that maybe there is something was left, to the story, even though at some point we had to make a decision about the gender. So maybe there was something.
Yes, and as I became more acquainted with the actual story that is being told, international schools are filled with rich and privileged children. And I can understand how bullying can happen in that context very easily. And so to understand Marketa in the role of creating these songs that hurt the perpetrator, that really brought a different dimension into this. And also, that the opera's narrative, the way it unfolds, is actually quite brilliant in the way it really changes our perception of these characters, including Thomas in that scene where you talk about the gang of 3 and how Iris was complicit in planning this shooting for over a year. So even without the presence of a perpetrator or the shooter, we understand who the shooter was and what he suffered as well. And it makes me think of other scenes in your novel where you do not portray the violence explicitly, but because it is, because you do not do that, it makes it even more powerful for the reader. Through our imagination, we can imagine the act of violence. Okay, so it's about Iris and othering, and how the character relationships really change in the course of this opera. And the inflection point, or the turning point, is when, of course, Thomas and Iris, they confront each other. And, of course, the priest is there, too. But I thought that was a brilliant tactic. You don't often find that in opera.
Why? I mean, that's something that if you write a novel or a play, then, you know, it's not an unusual way to do things or tell a story. So what's wrong?
Yeah, and I think it relates to this idea of realism. And this opera is really about a real context. And often when I think about Sarioho's previous operas, they deal with mythological contexts, especially the previous one with Ami Malouf on the Adriana Mater. She purposefully leaves out the name of the place where it takes place, so forth. So to make it more ritualistic and mythological is one prominent trend in contemporary opera. You don't do that with the exception of the ghost-like character, Marchetta. And because she arises as this character that at first I naively thought that she might have survived. And of course, you know, when she talks about being shot 3 times in the heart, then we know that she actually is a ghost. Then I think, well, what other ghosts are there in there? Are the other students ghosts as well? And I find out that I'm mistaken. She is the only ghost. So the realism is twisted somehow by the presence of that ghost-like character, which gives it a certain kind of operatic dimension that we crave, because the contemporary operatic trends have been much more about getting away from the linearity, the realism, and to make it more ritualistic.
Yeah, I'm not a strong believer in that school at all. I'm a very strong believer of the realism. It's, of course, you know, I mean, if I think about novels or theater, then I think, I don't think opera is that different. I mean, telling a good story is telling a good story. So in that way, I don't think opera has any restrictions that would make it a different. I mean, of course, it's a genre of its own, but it's not that different compared to theater or novels or even movies. You know, you create a world and tell a story.
Yes, except for the explicit presentation of violence. We're so numb from watching so much violence in television and other media. Here, you shield us purposefully. And in your novels as well. Well, Purge is the only one that I read halfway through. But a lot of the scenes of violence, we intuit that.
Yeah, well, the good thing about, you know, in opera, there's music. Mm-hmm. And that is something that, you know, you enjoy anyway, no matter what happens or what the story is about. It is something that gives you pleasure. And then in a novel, if you use good language, beautiful sentences, so that is again something that gives you pleasure. So I think that, you know, people are pleasure-driven, and that is what we are like. So music in opera and in novels, the language, they are the tools we need to use to seduce audience. to stay there with us and not to switch off.
Okay, it is an art of seduction, after all. We need sex, violence, and love. And whatever betrayal.
But aesthetics of the art protects us in a way, because it is something that gives us pleasure no matter what's happening in a story.
Yes, and often we go to hear the voice and the richness of the voice and what it conveys beyond words. I want to turn to, in the remaining time, before I turn the questions to the audience, about your Finnish Estonian background, and to whatever extent you feel comfortable about talking about trauma, and how that keeps coming up in your novels and other writings. Dog Park is on my list of the next novel that I will read. How much of your own experience of cultural trauma are you willing to share with us today?
Well, the reason why I have written multiple novels about the Estonian recent past is because my mother is Estonian, and I spent my childhood traveling back and forth, Soviet-occupied Estonia, Soviet Union, and Finland. So it's not more about the differences of Finnish and Estonian culture, but more about the differences between a totalitarian state dictatorship and then a Western democratic country. So in that way, I learned or understood the meaning of freedom of expression and the importance of it at a very early age. Also, I understood what you can do with art. I don't think it was so clear to other Finns. Sometimes I have a feeling that my colleagues in Finland still don't believe in that as strongly as I do. But Soviet Union, the reason why it fell apart and collapsed, there were multiple reasons, but art did play a role in it, definitely. Or like Solzhenitsyn said, that words can break cement, and that is why all dictatorship hate authors. They want to control authors. They want to control the word. And actually, I also, because I was born into a small town in Finland, Jyväskylä. They didn't have opera there, but when we went to Moscow, we always went to see opera. So actually, my first experience with opera is not in a Western country, but in Soviet Union, which was very proud of its opera. But in Soviet Union, opera was for everybody. It was not only for few selected. Opera tickets were practically free. I mean, they were so cheap. But of course, you needed to use, because it was popular, so you needed to use your relationships to get, or contact, or network to get the tickets. But I mean, the ticket itself was cheap. Or you could see the whole society actually going to the opera. So that has affected how I see that opera is for everybody. But when it comes to surviving from war traumas, then there was a difference. Obviously, in Soviet Estonia, you couldn't actually talk about what had happened because the public narration followed Soviet propaganda. That is also why, because after the collapse of Soviet Union, then and all Baltic states regained their independence, but they were still on the European map. They were like a blank spot. So I feel that I needed to write about it. Finns do write a lot about the recent past. We have a history with multiple wars. Winter war and the war of continuation. related to our non-friendly neighbor who is trying once in a century, always tries to get to us. There is also, this has also affected how Finns see weapons. That is the one explanation for that, for the high number of weapons we have in the country. War trauma is very much alive. I mean, my Finnish grandfather was a war veteran, obviously. Every single man of that generation went to the war. So it is very much something that is still alive. At the time, people didn't know how to deal with the PTSD. So there's definitely first and second generation war trauma. It does pass on from one generation to another. And also school shootings is something that, people do get PTSD. And it is also something that affects the whole community. So in that way, surviving from this kind of massacre can be psychologically actually quite similar to experiencing war or any, violent thing that can happen. So in that way, there's, surviving from trauma is not that different actually, if you think about different reasons why you might have PTSD. Except that nowadays we supposedly are having better tools for that.
My last question is, when you spoke in a symposium led by Peter Gelb, you talked about the difficulty of bringing justice to victims of war crimes and sexual abuse. And your important mission, one of your missions is to give space and voice to the victims. And I find that the role of women, not just in this opera, but in your novels, you really do attain that mission, and you continue to do so. Would you like to speak about that, the role of women?
Well, yes. I tend to have more female survivors because I've written about sexual violence, and mostly when it comes to sexual violence, then majority of the victims are women, no matter if it's a peacetime or a wartime violent act we are talking about. And there are, even though, if we're talking about a sexual assault or a trauma caused by school shooting or experiencing war, then what is common is that the survivors, they have survivor's guilt. That is something that is common to, school shootings, war. All refugees have survivor's guilt. And I don't know, maybe also, the second and the first generation might also have survivor's guilt.
I have survivor guilt from being Japanese.
Yeah, exactly. So in a way that it is also something that, and it does affect people, and I don't think this is something that gets enough attention. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's not considered big enough, or important enough. But it is there, and it does affect people, and therefore I think artists actually need to write about it. If you think about, and if I think about, my relatives, whether it's a surviving war, whether it's surviving occupation, they didn't use, of course it was, they were also, from different generations, but they didn't use very direct expressions. Which means that me as a child and also as an older person, I needed to learn read between the lines.
Yes.
And but how to convey the experience if they are not, using direct expressions? And because I have to make the people, talk to each other. In a novel, you could have, in a monologue, and you could have in opera as well. But dialogue is something that one has to have, at least some sort of dialogue, and that is it is an interesting challenge for an author, to find the language that is credible for the survivors. Yes. What are the expressions they are using when they are talking about something? And then again, trying to, because they are using the language where actually meanings are between the lines. It is often, maybe this is the problem also when you think about media. Media is very much focusing on the perpetrators and very much on the action, even though the long-lasting effects of that, whatever has happened that has caused the trauma is not action at all. It's not visible action. It is something that is inside you. So you have to, as an author, I have to somehow find the correct words to express that in a way that is understandable to audience, understandable also to people who have not gone through the same events at all. Yeah.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to open it up to the audience to see if you have any questions for Sofi Oksanen. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sofi, for your elaborations. This is your first and I believe only libretto, and I'm so curious how you dealt actually with creating language that is going to be set to music, which is very different from writing a novel or a play. So could you tell us a little bit about the process and your interaction with Kaya Saariaho that helps us understand how you grappled with that very unique challenge, if you want to call it a challenge?
Well, the word count is the only challenge. But actually, since I wrote Innocence last year, I wrote 2 new librettos. So, and the challenge was still the same, the word count. It's the word count, impossible word count. But when I start with a libretto, when any librettist starts with a text, you don't know what kind of music it creates. And that is something that I just have the paper, white paper, and I have no idea what's going to happen musically. That's up to the composer. And what I think is that if you try to write in a beautiful language that sounds good, then it's probably, then the composer is going to, they will approve it.
I just want to say that when I read Ami Malouf's libretto for Adriana Mater, she gave me her copy and she crossed out so many passages because it was just too many words. And she just chose the passages that she wanted to set. So that's another way to do it if you rather than thinking about the excess.
I think the author should have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, I still have it. It's crossed out here and she just wants to do this passage. Okay.
So I'm really interested in your struggle with word count on this. Obviously, you expressed this at the Guggenheim. You've made a clear point that this was one of the biggest hurdles for you in this project, was to take the ideas that flow with a certain kind of narrative and a certain freedom of words, and then to try to extract some kind of hybrid from that is now still the power of those words, but yet in a much reduced form. It almost feels like you're trying to find a hybrid between prose and poetry, where poetry is much more a kind of symbolic. The essence of speech can be found in poetry. So I mean, do you find what you finally got in the reduced version of word count, where you finally got that, do you find that you lost a lot of the original meaning in that, or did you still feel comfortable that somehow you developed a tool, a technique as writing that?
That's a good question. You know, the moment you cut is painful. You're cutting your arm. But then, in the end, I understood that I didn't need that arm at all. But in a way that that means that you have to have enough time to write the text, and I had enough time to write the libretto. So in a way that, because you need to put the text on hold for a while, and then my secret talent is that I forgot very easily what I have written. So if I put the text, you know, away, and I do not think about it for a month, and then I pick it up and go back to work, and then I'm like, what happened here? So in a way that's some authors remember very well what they have written, but I forget immediately when I close my laptop. I can't remember what I just did. So that's a good thing, I think, because then I have fresh look at the text. But yeah, it's one of the most important rules of writing is kill your darlings, simply, and that's the best rule you can have. It is a painful moment when you do that, but you will be happier afterwards. I haven't missed a single words that I have cut out.
Thank you for explaining a lot of your process. I was wondering, in your role as a novelist, and it seems to be social commentator critic, and you have come back to librettos, is there something that you experienced or learned or have taken away from working with libretto, and as you say, you don't know the music later, but this form of writing that has influenced or changed the way you think about novels, or about how in your role as social commentator or critic, reaching a different audience, a broader audience?
Well, opera audience is different. If I write a novel, then anyone could be a reader. Just I have a lot, because addicts read a lot when they are on rehab, so I have a lot of addict readers. Also homeless readers in Finland, because they go to libraries. They might not have access to internet, but they do have access to libraries. So in a way that any person I meet can be a reader, if they can read, and nowadays we have audiobooks as well, so actually you don't even need to be able to read the text. But people who go to opera, they have to have money enough to buy the tickets. So in that way, it's a different audience. And in different countries, opera has a different status. What I'm very happy, and I know that for Kaija, the new generation was important, and I'm very happy that with Innocence we have really managed to reach out to younger people as well. So many people who haven't ever visited an opera house or seen an opera performance have come to see Innocence, and and with those with whom I've talked to, they say that they will go again. So in that way, that is extremely positive. One thing is also, I think this is, and it's a bit weird, if you think about opera, if a person who hasn't ever seen opera goes to opera and doesn't like it, they will not return. It's the same with ballet as well, you know. A little bit less with theater, but also possible. If somebody who doesn't, you know, has never been to theater and then goes to see a very traditional version of Hamlet, then it's possible that they will not return. But then again, nobody is judging novels like that. If you read your first novel, then you don't think that, okay, this is it, I'm done, I'll never read another book. People don't like that, don't think like that, and I don't know what it is. In that way, you know, novels are more merciful, and it's tough. It's tough, you know, if somebody comes the first time, and it has to be an experience satisfying enough. That is tough. It's a bit. I think that's there should be more mercy. You know?
Again, I think about the multi-sensory environment you create through your novel. The smell of this pig ear soup and the worms crawling out of raspberries, and it's just so rich. And okay, one more question, Daniela.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything you've shared here and at the Guggenheim as well. I'm curious about your perspective on adaptation. This is an original libretto. I don't know if the other librettos you wrote were also original, but I know that Purge has been adapted to different genres. Also, translation is a form of adaptation. I'm curious about your perspective on adaptation of your own work, how much you're involved in that, if you have feelings about it or views on the process at all.
In general, the moment, the day, my deadline day is the day when baby leaves the house. And the nest is empty and I'm just, you know, happy. And after that, I don't feel that kind of ownership anymore to the text. So it's out there. I have no control over it. Of course, I do hope that translations are good. I trust my publishers. I have to. I don't read all the languages my books have been translated into. I'm very happy now with my English translator. English is the language I can read, and I can comment on that. But majority of the translations I'm not able to read, and I don't read. So I just, you know, I have to trust the editors and the publishing house. I've seen quite many adaptations of my plays. I'm not happy with all of them. But then again, I do respect the time and effort that the company or the theater house and the actors, I mean, they are anyway going every single day on stage with that text. So it doesn't actually matter if I like the adaptation or not. It's important that the actors are happy with it. Because then again, if they are not happy, then it's kind of, I'm sad for them. Because they have to anyway face the audience every single night. And that's the same for the opera as well. So in that way, it's not, I mean, I can stay at home and I don't have to face the audience. So in that way, it's easy for me. Then again, movies are another question. Let's not talk about movies. You know that, you know, majority of movie adaptations are not better than the book. Or if the book is bad, then you might have a good adaptation. That's a possibility. It's rare to have like good novel is having a good. But with majority of theater adaptations, I'm what I've seen that I'm happy enough, and I've been very happy with Innocence, but I know that there probably will be adaptations or you know new productions that I'm kind of, what is this? But as I said, that for me, it's the most important thing is that, and also this is something that I try to keep in mind when writing librettos or plays, is that there will be actors or singers who are going on stage every single night with that text. And I don't want them to be bored. I don't want them to feel meaningless. Of course, it's a director that needs to make sure that they don't feel like, why am I here? But it is anyway that if the audience doesn't like it or doesn't really understand it, then it's those who are on stage, they will feel it. I don't feel it. I can, just drink coffee at home and be totally happy with it. So in that way, I feel responsibility for the people who are actually, performing.
Yeah, thank you. We're almost out of time. And I just want to say that I want to conclude by saying the most memorable line in this opera is when Marketa, at the end of the opera, says, "Mama, let me go." And to me, that's just a very powerful statement of what we deal with in traumatic situations. So on that note, please thank Sofi Oksanen for this wonderful interview. And
thank you.